What is up, everyone? It's Quinn here, and in today's video, I'm going to be going through my Week 14 top 12 defense rankings. If you guys enjoyed the video, do me a huge favor, hit that like button and subscribe. If you haven't seen my running back and wide receiver rankings, those were posted earlier today. But let's just dive right into the defenses here. Maybe not the strongest week since we have 6 teams on bye, but definitely still a lot of playable options. So starting off here in tier 1, my number 1 defense is going to be the Steelers taking on the Browns. The Steelers defense, coming off a tough game against the Bengals in terms of just points allowed, but the Bengals offense, very, very good. On the season, the Steelers are number 3 in points per game. You look at the Cleveland Browns, according to Vegas, they have the second lowest implied point total. The Jameis Winston experience is always going to be there. I mean, Monday night was the perfect example where he can go out, he can look amazing, he can rack up a ton of volume stats, but you're always going to have the turnover risk. So he's, I think, started 5 games this year. In those 5 games, he has 9 turnovers. I don't think he's going to have some nuclear performance here against the Steelers. And even if he does go out, throw for 400 plus yards, 4 touchdowns, he always has, I guess, the upside for the defense of throwing 3 picks and 2 pick sixes. So I still like the Steelers here, even though Jameis kind of has that like nuclear upside. Also in tier 1, I have the Eagles going up against the Panthers. The Panthers have the lowest implied point total this week. This Eagles defense had a rough start to the season. I think it was through 4 weeks. Then they had their bye. Since then, they have really put things together here. They have allowed 20 or fewer points in each of their last 8 games. And it's not like they've just had like the easiest schedule. Within those last 8, they've played the Bengals, the Ravens, the Commanders, the Rams. They held the Bengals, Ravens, and Commanders all to under 20. The Rams are the team that did put up 20. So they've been very consistent. I know the Panthers, have looked better as of late, but I do think the Eagles are going to get the better of this matchup. And then the last team I have here in tier 1, it's going to be the Vikings going up against the Falcons. They are still the number 1 defense in points per game. The Falcons offense has looked a little suspect as of late. They've only put up 36 points in their last 3 games, 36 total. Kirk Cousins in those last 3, he has 6 interceptions, 0 touchdowns. The Vikings are leading, all defenses in picks. I think this is a good spot here for the Vikings. Even though the Falcons offense, maybe a little bit better than like a prime matchup, I still think the Vikings can get the better of this one. Now moving into tier 2, 3 more defenses. We have the Titans going up against the Jaguars. The Jaguars are tied for the 3rd lowest implied point total. In the 3 games where Mac Jones has played legit snaps, they've scored 33 total points. So I'm not scared of this Jaguars offense. Do the Titans have like this shutdown, amazing defense? No. But I do think they can get the better of this matchup here against the Jaguars. More of a bet against Mac Jones and the Jaguars than it is a bet, in favor of the Titans. Kind of a similar spot here with the Saints going up against the Giants. They're actually tied for the 3rd fewest implied point total with the Jaguars. The Saints actually have looked decent as of late. In the last 3 weeks, they're only giving up 17.3 points per game. And against somewhat competent offenses in the Falcons, Browns, and the Rams. The Giants quarterback situation is completely up in the air. Obviously, Daniel Jones is now gone. They went to Tommy DeVito. He got hurt. They went to Drew Lock. I did think Drew Lock would be like the better option, a little bit, scarier for opposing defenses. He really did not look all that great on Thanksgiving. So whether it's Locke or DeVito, I think the Saints are a strong play regardless. And then the last team in this tier is the Bucks going up against the Raiders. Bucks definitely have a favorable schedule down the stretch. Didn't perform great against the Panthers, but I still think they're a fine play here against the Raiders. The Raiders have the 5th lowest implied point total. Aiden O'Connell is actually coming off a pretty great game against the Chiefs. Threw for 340 yards, 2 passing touchdowns. The Raiders, racked up 116 rushing yards. So they're not coming off a bad game. I still think though, right, we've seen a lot of this Raiders offense. It has not looked great. I think the Bucks are a fine play. And now moving into tier 3, going to start off with the Cardinals going up against the Seahawks. And this Cardinals defense has really started to lock down over the last few weeks. In their last 4 games, they're averaging 12 points per game allowed. We actually just saw this matchup in week 12, and they held Seattle to 10 offensive points. I think they had a pick 6 somewhere in there, but in terms of the actual defense, only gave up 10 points. They have 19 sacks in the last 4 games, so they're starting to put it together at the right time. I think the Cardinals are a solid play. Then I have the Chiefs going up against the Chargers, And the Chiefs have been in this spot where they've had some nice matchups and they have not necessarily come through for fantasy. And so I don't love, having to rely on them again, but 6 teams on bye. It's a decent matchup here against the Chargers. The Chargers are bottom 6 in implied point total. The run game is likely going to be non-existent. I mean, the Chiefs on their own, just completely shut down the run. The J.K. Dobbins injury, it's not looking good with Gus Edwards as the lead back. And now you also have the Chargers' clear-cut number 1 weapon, Ladd McConkey, dealing with a knee injury. That's not great. If Ladd McConkey's out, this is a truly all-time terrible skill position unit that Justin Herbert would have. You'd have Quentin Johnston as your wide receiver 1, Gus Edwards as your running back 1. It is not a pretty situation. Will Dissly at tight end. The Chargers struggled against the Falcons, only scored 10 offensive points. Even though the Chiefs have been disappointing in matchups, against the Panthers, the Raiders, I still think, they can pull through here against the Chargers. And then the last team in this tier, I guess another team that's been somewhat disappointing, the 49ers going up against the Bears. The Bears have the 8th lowest implied point total. They've started to put some things together offensively, but I still don't think they're going to be going out and firing on all cylinders. 49ers still trying to make a push to the playoffs. I don't think they're the most amazing play in the world, but I do have them within my top 10. And then moving into my 4th and final tier, we're going to start off with the Dolphins taking on the Jets. The Jets are bottom 6 in implied points this week. Aaron Rodgers has thrown for under 190 passing yards in his last 3 games. And as a team, they have not hit 300 total yards in the last 4 weeks. I think at this point, everyone should just be accepting this Jets offense is not putting it together. Even coming out of the bye week, they looked decent early on and just completely fell apart against the Seahawks. This is just not a good offensive unit. They are not scary to go up against. So even though this Dolphins defense hasn't been great, it's a fine matchup against the Jets. And then these last 2 teams, they're just good defenses with not so great matchups. We have the Bills going up against the Rams. The Bills are 5th in points per game. They are top 4 in interceptions and forced fumbles, and they have scored 8 or more fantasy points in 5 of the last 6 games. So they've been consistent. Like I said, not a great matchup here against the Rams, but I'm not terrified of this Rams overall offense. And then the last team here, the Lions going up against the Packers. The Lions are tied with the Bills for 5th in points per game. They are 3rd in interceptions. I do think that could bode somewhat well with Jordan Love, who's been, somewhat turnover prone this year, but it's not a good matchup here against the Packers. I think the Packers can put up points, but, it's kind of just you're banking on the good defense versus the good offense. Not quite sure which team is going to come out ahead. I do think if you're desperate, though, you could do worse than a top 5 fantasy defense, even in a not so great matchup. So that's going to wrap it up for my top 12. Like I said, with 6 teams on bye, not going to be stacked at the defense spot, but definitely some teams that are playable. Hopefully you're in a good spot here, the last week or 2 before the fantasy playoffs. If you guys did enjoy the video, hit that like button, subscribe, check out the other rankings videos. I'll also have quarterbacks and tight ends coming out tomorrow. But thank you all for stopping by, and I will see you in the next one.